Well, no, we ain't fine. But I always say the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
What?
Simply because you don't have evidence that something does exist does not mean that you have evidence that something doesn't exist.
What?
What country you from?
What?
What ain't no country I ever heard of? They speak English in what?
What?
English, motherfucker! Do you speak it?
Yeah.
So you understand the words I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is that there are known knowns and that there are known unknowns, but there's also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know.
What?
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker.
So maybe by the time that you're watching this video, the Switch Mini and the Switch Pro have already made their debuts and this video was completely pointless.
Okay, first of all, like the YouTube algorithm.
As of the recording of this video, I sit in this little particular space where nothing has happened yet. Nintendo has denied any revisions coming out for the OG Switch, and I wanted to explain what I think is going to happen with the Switch going forward 2019 and on out. When I first started on this video idea, I really struggled. I struggled as to what to call this, but by the end I figured out exactly what the hell I should call this, and you've seen it already in the title. My plan is to make the ultimate Switch, keeping pricing in mind and cost, because nobody likes cost. Again, I know Nintendo has denied a Switch Pro and a Switch Mini being in the works, but it's really no surprise considering it's a Nintendo trend and an industry trend to actually have iteration bumps as time goes on. I mean, think about it. You've got your iPhones, you've got your Xbox One S's, you've got your PlayStation Pros and all that other good stuff. Nintendo's company is no different in that fact. Nintendo having the 3DS line is really no stranger to upgrades. You had the OG DS. Nintendo DS Lite, which released in 2007, which was just a lightweight version of the OG. The DSi, being the third generation, sported a better processor and better screen brightness, and then you had the DSi XL in 2009, larger screen, just general improvements over time, improved battery life, all that other good stuff that you normally see. And then of course you got the 3DS. It had a circle pad, an accelerometer, a gyroscope installed. It had other features that increased the quality of it. It also had 3D. Not too many people were fond of. The original Nintendo even got a top loader model, which was an iteration bump from the previous model that laid flat. The Wii got a mini version that couldn't play GameCube games nor connect to the internet. Fucking brilliant, Nintendo.
You're a freaking genius, you idiot!
What if, hear me out on this, what if the Nintendo Switch is not originally what it was supposed to be? Now hear me out. As I've said numerous times, the Nintendo Switch, as it stands now, an amazing console. It is by far my most favorite console of all time. Like, this console is amazing, but it feels very rushed. I feel like the Nintendo Switch that you probably hold in your hands if you're watching this particular video, I feel like that very Switch is a prototype for what the real Switch is supposed to be. Let me start you off with a little history. Take the company Nvidia that is making the chips for the Nintendo Switch. They are making the Tegra X1 for the Nintendo Switch, making a mountain of cash themselves back in 2015. Let's say how long it takes to develop something. We'll say like anywhere between 2012 to 2014, when this had to have been produced as a concept and been worked on and tested and all that other good stuff. But Nvidia ended up producing the Nvidia Shield. They wanted to capture a piece of the gaming market. The PS Vita was doing pretty poorly at the time, rest in pieces, and there was a slight opening there. Now Nintendo, of course, had a dominant grasp on the handheld market. Like, there's nothing, no matter what company tried, there was no company that could touch Nintendo as far as the Nintendo DS line. But boom, in 2015 you got the Nvidia Shield. It came to thunderous I don't care applause. It seemed smart, but no one gave a shit really. Add to the fact that Google was slow as hell to keep it up to date, like, nah, I'll do it later. The stigma of mobile games and anything being above $10, even me, I'm not going to touch, which is funny because if it's on the Switch, my dumb ass is going to be like, what a deal! It's also a testament that has been proven with the Xbox and Nintendo Wii U especially. No sales equals no game. No sales equals no console. Now we jump over to Nintendo's boat after we have relived Nvidia's boat being set on fire. Now Nvidia of course is going to be fine. They've got their partnership with Nintendo. Nvidia makes hand over fist money. Not to no one's surprise, we all know the Wii U bombed. I got one, and me personally, I loved it. The public didn't, unfortunately. The Wii U gamepad would die in a few seconds. Gamepad couldn't play games too far away from the console. It looked like a sleek Fisher-Price toy, and third parties bailed on the poor thing. The Wii U, yes, it was a failure, but come on, it still worked. You didn't have a drifting gamepad or no overheating or warping issues or anything like that, like you have in the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo, for as lovable as they are, most of the time, it's still a business, and they did. To me, it's very likely that the Switch was an unfinished prototype when it was put out to the market. Iwata having to take a pay cut, Miyamoto had to take a pay cut, new management being put in with Kimishima as interim CEO after Iwata's unfortunately passing. Reggie also didn't decide at the last minute, hey, I'm going to leave. I feel like Nintendo is they're silly, but they're also pretty crafty and forward thinking. A little backwards thinking, but they're pretty forward thinking. So I'm under the impression that Nintendo knew that the Wii U was failing and the life cycle had to be cut short. And during that cycle, Nintendo was obviously hard at work on a successor. So given around, we'll say 2015 to late 2016 at the very most, you had two planes that were on fire and they were crashing and they were burning at the same time. Like they both were in free fall. When the going gets tough, the tough kind of tend to get creative. It's possible to say anywhere between 2014 and 2016, Nintendo pretty much decided to take the parts of the Nvidia Shield and inject them into Nintendo's upcoming console. The Shield in its handheld form had the concept of the Nintendo Switch, just, to me, different execution. And where we're at, this is where I'm going to pick up. So we're going to hypothetically say, let's do an Arlo here. That's another YouTuber that you should definitely check out. I love me some Arlo. We're going to do this. We're going to have, hypothetically, Nintendo's going to say, hey, random YouTube nobody, you're hired. Make our next systems for us. Whatever, you got it. The rules for this: the Switch needs to be the Switch. It needs to be simple. We can't abandon the switching model of it. The ecosystem needs to stay uniform, and the games and the hardware all need to coexist as they do now. So, some obvious improvements. Considering how Nintendo likes to make products hardy and lasting, you can pick up an old Nintendo console and play it like it's nothing, but think about this. As I've said that, do you not find it odd, even with the sophisticated technology that's in the Switch, do you not find it odd for a company that's had such a track record for making products last? They're like the Honda of the gaming console market. Do you feel like it's not odd to have Nintendo consoles with physical issues, warping, with Joy-Con drift, with D-pad issues like that? That doesn't strike you as odd even a bit. I really feel like that's some rushing in there. Another thing that we're going to do, quality of life improvements that are going to be understood going into these models. Dumbass kickstand and middle Nintendo, come on. Or however you want to do it, but I feel like that kickstand should, it's just a crappy kickstand. The cost of having to use a warranty, get it shipped in, get it shipped back, that's costing you money, Nintendo. You put metal pieces in there for that click the Switch into place. I think that saves you money in the long run if you're not already doing it now. But that needs to be taken care of. The warping, the issue with the whole heat sink and all that. Now, I've had to send mine in too. That one, it had the back plate was bending because it was overheating, and I didn't even play it a lot docked or anything. Like I was just playing it portably, but over time, like it just started doing that, and I think that's another issue of rushed design. So that would be another thing that we fix in both the, which for the most part it's already been fixed now, but just saying that's something to keep in mind for the Switch Pro and the Switch Mini. The cracking as well, same thing. Getting overheated or anything, that's something that really should not happen. Now, I can give them some leeway, but you need to sell a quality product. And I say give them leeway because I think of the Xbox 360's Red Ring of Death. That was piss poor on Microsoft's part. But that's just another thing that needs to be fixed. A couple of other things that need to be fixed too. Better quality Wi-Fi. I think the Wi-Fi range on it is too weak. I understand that cost is an issue, but If we take a 2-year jump from when it first came out, as far as boosting, I think Wi-Fi definitely needs to be thrown in there. Getting a LAN is just, it's inexcusable because that ruins the portability aspect of it. So the only other way to fix that is to work on the Wi-Fi. No themes and music. Come on, Nintendo. I don't even need to go into detail on this. What the hell is taking so long? Now we move on to your obvious upgrades. Screen quality.
I'm hunting weapons.
Screen quality. 1080p. So it's been stated before, and it's easily confirmable. The eye, for such a small screen, really can't discern between 1080p and 720. But I think if you really want to compete with it's not, and I get that Nintendo's not directly in. Nintendo is in direct competition of Xbox and PC and PlayStation, but it also isn't, like, because Nintendo likes to end up doing their own thing, kind of separated. I like where they're going with that. I like the fact that Nintendo wants it to be more of a complementary system rather than a competing system. But we broke out here. You pick one or the other if you're lucky. So you're still kind of competing with the Nintendo, so please keep that in mind. Obvious stuff, better battery life. I think the life of the battery on the Switch is pretty good, but if I play it for too long, I'll end up feeling like crap, so I hadn't really experienced massive drawdowns of battery life. But no question, the people that don't have responsibilities or anything like that, which is not really a bad thing at all, but people that want to just veg out and just play Nintendo Switch all day, make it in handheld mode, just soup up the battery. It needs it. Better performance, that's really a no-brainer. Less bezel. If you really want to make the Nintendo Switch bigger, because boy, we love our big screens, the bezel it's too much, but I'm also feeling like they put the bezel there because it gives Nintendo to go somewhere with the next iteration. So you get the next, like the Switch 2, for example, less bezel. Switch 3, less bezel. Lest we also not forget that Nintendo, in its infinite wisdom, decided that 32 gigabytes of storage, yes, you get expandable micro SD cards up to 1 terabyte, but that storage is paltry.
Your storage space is ass.
That storage would have been passable back in like 2011, maybe. Like, I think that would be amazing for it, possibly. But there's really no excuse for such bad storage space on the Switch. Now for the RAM. We have to give a shout out to the Blue Bomber Mega Man. If it wasn't for you, we'd have 2 gigabytes of RAM on the Nintendo Switch instead of 4 gigabytes of RAM. Yes, and if you guys can believe it or not, Nintendo was thinking 2 gigabytes of RAM was going to be enough for the Nintendo Switch in 2017. That sounds pretty ridiculous. Are Nintendo's wizards and they can do a lot of right with very little? Yes, they can. But you have to take into account third-party developers aren't like Nintendo. Like, they want all the horsepower that they can get. So just doing 2 gigabytes of RAM was kind of insane. Also, you Capcom and Mega Man, I don't know, whatever. Or a $30 Resident Evil 4 game. Now that we've got the preliminaries out of the way, let's jump into what I have in mind for the Switch Mini and the Switch Pro. So for the Switch Mini, I'd go 2 ways. One, I would keep the original design, but make the Switch more child-proof. We can go into like a Kitty Fisher-Price direction of it. That probably would cut down on the manufacturing cost of it. Or what we could do is bring back the Nintendo DS. Now hold on. Bottle that raid. We're using the same concept, not the same device. We use the same concept that is the Nintendo DS design, but we modernize it. And let's be honest, that little baby has needed to be modernized since its conception. So first what we're doing is starting off with the Nintendo DS. It's a cute little bugger, isn't it? First off, let's give her a bigger screen. Let's go ahead and make that screen about 5 inches, or we could be a little bit more generous and make it about 6 inches. Give the people what they want. And just like what is expected on the Switch Pro, we do it on the Switch Mini. Let's shrink that bezel size just a bit. I feel like, honestly, when Nintendo came out with the Nintendo Switch, they could have easily made the bezel smaller, but from a business standpoint, I think it's safe to assume that Nintendo purposefully, technological aspects aside, Nintendo purposefully made the bezel as thick as it is. Like, considering the way that smartphones are now, you can't tell me that you just had to make the bezel that thick. I feel like they left the bezel so thick because so they can make a bump up from that. So the next generation of the Nintendo Switch, you shrink the bezel, you give them more ooh and ah as time goes on. From a business standpoint, I think that's a pretty smart move. Not a very nice move, but I think it's very smart. Or who knows, it could have been a cost thing. I think it's business. And along with that little DS style Nintendo Switch, you have a cheap little stand that has a couple of, it's the same as the dock, but it uses less plastic. And considering the fact that you have knockoff docks, and I guess it's not really fair to say knockoff docks, but considering the fact that you have alternatives, there we go, now we're politically correct, alternative docks that are around 10 to 15 bucks, I see no problem with how Nintendo is able to do this. Just give me the X amount of ports, because adding USB ports to a device, manufacturing wise, I don't think it's that expensive. It's relatively cheap now. I mean, it's been done for over a decade now, so I don't think that's too hard. Not only that, but feel free to tell me that I'm an idiot in the comments when I say I feel like Nintendo Switch dock cups the Switch console, that it adds heat. Like, yes, you have the heat sink and the heat, you know, the fan blowing it out of the top, but I just feel like that's part of it. Even if it's a little bit, I feel like it all adds up. If that was an open space to where air could just get around it total, I don't think you would have a lot of the warping issues. Just call me crazy. Say for instance, if it was open or you didn't have the Nintendo Switch dock at all, number one, you wouldn't have the scratching anymore. So having a laying down, like a dock that lies down, that would kill that altogether. And then number two, on top of that, if you wanted to make sure it was ventilated, somebody could easily put, you know, it seems kind of crazy to have to do, but you know, if you want to just make sure, if you're in a hot or a warm climate, you could put a fan behind it and boom, no more warp. You got the fan of the Switch working with your whatever fan that you have, bada boom, bada bing. And that's just something that I did, a little manufacturing. I love the way the Switch dock looks, but I can see how even with plastic not conducting that much heat, that I can see every little bit adds up. You've got the game running hard and it's kind of cupped in this, you know, in this dock, and I feel like it adds a little bit more heat to it. I could be wrong. Like I said, let me know in the comments that I'm an idiot, and let's keep going. But what you can do is have the connector that's the same as the regular dock, have it to where you can use the Nintendo Switch Mini, sit it down on it, and here's the kicker. Here is where we switch at. When you have it in handheld mode, it plays just like a DS. It's more than likely that you aren't going to be playing with anyone else in handheld mode, so I think that's perfect. But when you want to switch it to the big screen, you sit it down on the stand. It doesn't switch just yet. You fold the screen down and then it outputs onto the TV. And wait, there's more. What we do is we have two controllers that separate from the center metal piece that holds together that Nintendo Switch Mini. Think a DS, but the controllers on the side separate. They separate into Joy-Cons. And just like the Joy-Cons form factor, it feels good in the hand to hold. So if you're playing by yourself, you play it like a Nintendo DS. When you want to play with a friend, you can sit it down on the table, no dock, have the screen up. You don't need the kicks, that little stupid kickstand that it has anymore, and you can play it just like that. I think you can have a fairly light screen. I could be wrong. Now granted, you would have that extra cost with the hinged screen, but they've done it before with the Nintendo DS. I don't really see a problem with that. I think that will be pretty awesome. And not only that, considering the fact that it's a kid's device at this point, or at least to where it's more kid friendly, you can close it when you're done, and that acts as a screen protector. I'm trying to pat myself on the back. Cost-wise, basic rumble can go into the base model. I was trying to figure out how to keep the HD rumble. Me personally, I think it's really cool, but it's more of a luxury. There are games that currently rely on HD rumble, but I think the list of those games that rely on it can easily be patched, because most of these are first-party Nintendo games, and I'm pretty sure, considering the fact that they've added VR support, I don't see why a patch like this could be a big deal. The Joy-Con attachments stay relatively the same size, so they can be used in between those devices. And without the HD rumble, based on the features that are in the Xbox One controller and the PlayStation 4 controller, probably just a rough estimate may bring it down to around $20 to $35. And over the course of millions of Switches sold, that definitely adds up. Wow, I talked too damn much. You mean we haven't made it to the Pro version yet? Let's get the Pro version out of the way. So, Pro version, what should you expect? We keep the design the same. That's a given. Because the Nintendo Switch as it is, it's a fantastic design. It's very simple, very versatile, very functional. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. A couple of tweaks that I would make. Like I said, bezel, definitely it's going to be thinner. If you are going to get the Pro model, chances are you are a hardcore gamer. So what I expect you to do then is to play fairly often, which means we need to make it a little bit more comfortable for you. Let's do specific Joy-Cons for these. Joy-Cons that have a teenager to young adult grip set in mind. So if you're going to be playing for a long, well, because the Nintendo Switch, playing handheld right now isn't bad over long term, but it can be just a little bothersome, just a bit. Take a similar approach to that popular Nintendo Switch grip. Let's try to increase part of the size of it just a bit. We could make it the same to where those Joy-Cons could fit across the board, but make the sides of it a bit wider. Just, for the bigger hands, because we all don't have baby hands. Better battery life, that's a given. Larger memory space. For the memory space, I don't think I've really talked about that across the board. They definitely, on average, need to start off at 256 gigabytes. I'm not sure if Nintendo's going to do that, but 32 gigabytes is pathetic. Now, everybody, or at least a lot of people, like to make well, you could just add 2 terabyte SD card, and you're right. You can, and I understand the whole cost functionality. Like, my life is built around cost issues, but we have to meet in the middle here. We're taking the Xbox 360 controller in mind because that arguably to me is the most comfortable controller that I have ever felt. Also in the Pro version, let's make sure that higher resolutions are stabilized. We can't have it fluctuating and hiccuping around the place. We streamline portability of the games. Like, that all needs to be unified, and there needs to be no issue with it in any way, shape, or form. 60 FPS capability. Considering the fact that we have the PS5 and the next version of the Xbox around the corner, probably easily in 2020 and 2021, the Switch is going to have to step its game up. It's been a great ride in this little space that Nintendo has, but I know they're not stupid and they're not thinking, okay, well, this is just it. No, we need to go ahead and future-proof. 60 frames per second, bare minimum. We cannot do. You may be able to skate by with the Switch Mini and lower and make that not be the case, but I don't advise it. But that's just me. 1080p, that's a given. Signal out. 720p for the Mini. You may be able to get away with that, but 1080p has been a thing since, as far as like a standard for consoles, since like 2013. It needs to at least be an option. That way, if you want to save that battery life and not do 1080p because you can't tell the difference, then you have the option to switch to 720. Give the customer an option to switch. That's the happiest medium I think you can get out of that. And of course, just general quality of life, like I mentioned before. Run smoother, power management. You could go with the Tegra X2 or the Parker chip. I think this can also be done with at least, let's make it bare minimum, 8 gigabytes of RAM for the Pro model. And for the Switch Mini, 4 gigabytes of RAM probably will be okay. Probably. Don't quote me on that, but probably. But on a Pro model, 8 gigabytes of RAM with the Tegra X2 for better power management, your system's looking pretty good. And there you have it. That is my revision setup. We have the $200 Nintendo Switch Pro Mini. We have the $300 regular Nintendo Switch, the legacy one, whatever the hell you want to call it. And we have the $400 Nintendo Switch Pro model. All Switches going forward get the general quality of life improvements. The Pro gets a slight bump up, similarly, or at least not as similarly to the PlayStation 4 Pro. You reach a casual audience with the OG one, you reach your kiddies with the Nintendo Switch Mini version, and you reach your hardcore, your core Nintendo with your Pro version. We kind of hit all the bases there. Kind of like the Samsung strategy, except you're not releasing 1,000 different variants of the Switch. You're just releasing, you know, two more, making it a family line. All right, Nintendo, now that I've designed your newest consoles, you can send the check to this address. But none of that yen crap. I needed in unmarked pesos. And I will only accept them from the Reginator. You know, if he's not too busy playing Animal Crossing New Leaf.
That's all the time I've got.